Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Third Impact Anime Podcast. I'm your host, Austin, the king of podcasts. And today, we're doing yet another 10th anniversary episode talking about an anime that came out in 2011, just like we did a couple months ago when we talked about Madoka Magica. And this actually also has a lot of other connections to Madoka that we will talk about a little bit later. But on this episode, we're talking about Fate Zero. And this is, of course, going to be the first time we're really jumping into the massive, sprawling beast that is the Fate franchise. But who is going to fight me in this Grail War of a podcast? Go ahead and introduce yourself. Someone that isn't me.
We'll go down the list. I am Ryan, and I am the king of colds today, and I will fight you for this podcast.
And who else do we have?
I'm Sarah. I'm probably the king of minding my own fucking business and not dying in a war. So yeah.
And I'm Will, the king of saber stands.
This is true. This is true.
A truer statement has never been said.
Correct.
Yeah.
For sure. But before we get into our main topic, talking about Fate Zero, we'll just talk briefly about some of the things that we've been up to in the anime sphere and some current events that have been going on. First of all, I did want to say that as of this recording, maybe 2 days ago, I did have a chance to go see Macross Plus in theaters, and that was really awesome on multiple fronts. Front number one is that Macross Plus is pretty rad, and seeing it on the big screen was equally as rad. And it kind of, well, I think everybody is hoping that the fact that Macross Plus was able to have a theatrical run, and it seems like the future of Macross in the US might be a little bit more brighter these days than it may have been in previous years. Might really open up the franchise to having a lot more accessibility in the US. And I know, Sarah, you're a big Macross fan, but you didn't get a chance to go see the screening. But what do you think about all of this? Like, how do you feel about the future where Macross might be going?
Ooh, okay. I, for one, am very excited. Macross, Delta, and Frontier, but probably more so Frontier, are like two of my favorite series in the whole universe. So yeah, I'm hoping that whatever the next Macross series is, it'll very easily have, like, you know, simul subs and dubs and everything that's, like, you know, every other series gets now that it's out of the limbo. And yeah, even the music for those series, which is all very awesome, is on Spotify now, along with a ton of other anime series music on Spotify, thanks to Japanese record labels being a little bit more open to digital distribution, which I think is pretty good. But yes, I'm excited. We shall see.
Same.
Yeah, me too. I mean, Macross Plus is something that I got into mainly because I'm a really big fan of Shinichiro Watanabe, and I feel like that's probably the case for a lot of people in the West, especially for people that were not of the generation who watched, like, Robotech and that sort of stuff, which is way older than someone like myself. So I don't really have that much familiarity with Macross, but I'm hoping that, kind of like you said, the floodgates can slowly be opened and we can get more of that stuff around here. I know that Delta's fairly long in the tooth. Like, it started in 2016, but they just put out a movie like last year or something.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie, I thought you were talking about the COVID variant for a second.
Oh God, no!
I was like, no, Austin,
Delta,
that happened in
which
April.
ironically is about a virus. So oopsie. Yeah, Macross Delta. Yeah, they had a recap-ish movie, and then they had, like, a new content kind of movie over the past few years. So that's still going.
The next Macross will be Macross Omicron.
I hope not. I hope not. God, please.
That would be so dumb and stupid. But
There's a mobile game I play, and they just added like a new material to like, surpass the power limit that we originally had, and it was announced 2 days before the new variant was like hitting the mainstream, and they're like, yeah, we're calling this the Omicron material, and everyone's like, oh god, how long is it going to take them to change it?
Oh no.
Oh dear, that's very bad timing. Get your booster shots, kids. Just go out there and get them.
Yeah.
That's a good thing for you to do. But yeah, seeing Macross Plus, I mean, I will say, and I'm not the only one in this camp that had this problem, but I did kind of have an issue with the visual fidelity of the film on the big screen. It looked like they were just sort of screening like a DVD rip.
Oh, shit.
And I'm like, a friend of mine imported the Macross Plus Blu-ray that they made like years ago in Japan. Like this looks immaculate. Like this material exists. It's not like it only has an SD version. So I don't know what Fathom Events was doing, only having this particular version. Maybe they couldn't get the HD version from Japan, which would be, I don't know, possible, because sometimes Japanese production companies can be super weird about stuff. But like, come on, this is your big chance. Like, why show a very, very subpar visual quality movie in your big opportunity to reintroduce Macross Plus to a wider U.S. audience? I was a little frustrated by that, but the movie itself is really good. Like, it holds up. It holds up pretty well. I think the music's really weird. Sharon Apple is like an insane, like, killer VTuber, like
AI
25
thing.
years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild, like how
That's our future, folks.
I know it's our present.
True.
But yeah, I don't really have anything else I want to talk about. Has anybody else been doing any cool anime stuff or any recent announcements that they're excited for?
So I actually kind of have been doing anime stuff in a sense that I applied for 8 panels at Momocon this year, and I've made like 3 of them. So I've been working on the other 5. And that's...
Do you want to give us a sneak peek about some of your topics?
Yeah, that's why this is like sort of a loose thing of me working on anime, because it really depends on your definition. Because one of them that I'm like sincerely hoping that they accept, it is my favorite title that I've ever come up with, and it's called Is Mayonnaise an Anime? And I'm basically going, as stupid as that one sounds, I actually have like a relatively serious topic for it. Like, I'm going to talk about all the shows that like everybody thinks or like talks about and considers is anime, like Avatar: The Last Airbender and Ruby for like 2 of them. And I'll go into like a bunch of others, and then I'll also talk about like, hey, by the way, while we're talking about this, what actually does make anime an anime? And I'm going to be like, well, everyone usually says in Japan. I'm going to be like, wrong, because most of Japanese anime like outsources to Korea now, so it's not even made in Japan. And it's going to be a good old time that people are going to get very angry at me at, and I can't wait.
You also have an opportunity to sort of do that in reverse, because you could talk about stuff like Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, which was an American production, but most of the animation was done in Japan. So is
Chip 'n
that an
Dale is
anime?
Yes,
Yeah.
Chip 'n Dale is the best anime.
And not to get too off topic, but I did recently watch for the first time the 1977 Rankin Bass The Hobbit movie.
Oh, wow.
And okay, well, first of all, that movie rules. It's extremely good.
I haven't
So
watched it in
good.
a long time, but like I remember liking it, but it was also like dated.
I mean, yeah, it obviously looks like a movie that's from the 70s, and it's very weird, but I loved it. I thought it was awesome. It was a great... It really showcases how much Peter Jackson fluffed up those the live action Hobbit trilogy.
You mean
but
he
anyway,
made
that's
3
beside the
movies
point.
when he didn't need to make 3 movies?
Right. I mean, you could tell the entire story of The Hobbit in like an hour and a half.
Yes.
And because they did in
Yes.
1977. Anyway, my point was I got to the credits, and like most of the talent that worked on that film was Japanese. So there's another angle you could go from there too. So
By the way,
yeah.
I need to apologize.
Animation's global.
I need to apologize to you actually because I lied. I actually have watched something anime related recently.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
I finally caught up on Castlevania.
Oh, now listen here.
See,
Done in Texas, Japan.
you see how much I like to you see how much I like to fight about this topic.
Yeah, I can tell.
Yeah, but
Well, speaking of
I actually did enjoy it. It was very good.
Speaking of fighting, we do have a battle royale anime to discuss. If anybody else doesn't have any updates they'd like to share.
I'd rather not talk about Fortnite if it's all the same with you.
Share,
All right, well,
Will.
Will's got
Let's
something.
hear.
So this is kind of one side project I've been doing on my own, but in terms of recent anime for me, I've been going through and watching every Miyazaki film in release order because I had never seen a Miyazaki film before. So I find it really interesting to see like how his style is kind of adapted over time. So far, I've watched Castle of Cagliostro, Nausicaa, and Castle in the Sky, and I believe next is My Neighbor Totoro. I believe.
That would be right.
Yep.
So I'm very excited. Surprisingly for me, Castle of Cagliostro was my favorite so far, and I've never watched any Lupin either, and it was just a real good trip. I loved it.
Castle of Cagliostro was the first Lupin thing I ever watched, and I loved it.
It's the first Lupin thing that most people watch these days, unless they watch like one of the newer TV anime, the actual like TV shows. But I'm really glad that you're doing this experiment, Will, because I think that's pretty cool. Because not very few people end up watching Miyazaki like from in chronological order, because most of the time like somebody saw like Kiki's Delivery Service or Spirited Away like as a one-off and kind of got into his work. But the fact that you've like intentionally started from the beginning, I think is pretty neat.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to keep us updated next time you come on.
Oh, for sure. As a kid, I was just watching Toy Story on repeat, so I never got to experience any of his films growing up.
I mean, I kind of relate to that because I also watched Toy Story on repeat.
And then real quick, if we're talking about just upcoming anime that I'm a little excited for, is Bubble. Have you guys heard about
Yes.
Bubble from Wit Studio?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually talked about that whenever Bill and I did the Detective Conan episode last time.
I am excited also because it's going to be written by a very certain individual we'll be discussing later on today.
Yep.
So
that guy.
Mamoru
Although
Hosoda.
I am concerned though because I'm a big fan of Wit Studio's work, but it just makes me more anxious for Vinland Saga season 2.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So that might push
Is that
back.
coming out?
It's
Maybe
been announced, but
someday.
we don't have. Yeah, there's no official date, but they're just like, yep, it will happen. So
I
Eventually.
wonder.
When Jeff Bezos feels
wonder-
like throwing money at it, I guess.
oh gosh,
Yeah, that was going to be my question because I know that like Amazon is where anime exclusives go to die, basically, because
There haven't actually been
stuff
that many Amazon ones lately, have there?
No, and even if there were, you would never hear about them.
Well, because they tried to do the like anime exclusive little portal thing, and then they cut
Oh,
that
that
out and just
failed,
merged
yeah.
it with everything else, and then
Anime
and now they're just
strike.
kind of like,
Yeah.
we're just gonna let other people do that.
I remember Austin had like a tirade about Anime Strike back in the day.
It wasn't a good platform.
No,
it was
it's
like an additional
terrible.
cost on top
But-
of Prime, just
Yeah.
very bad.
Yeah.
I mean, Amazon did promote the new Evangelion movies.
Yes.
They did do a fairly good job at that. Excuse me, but I feel like a lot of their TV stuff, and I mean like Evangelion is a massive name, so of course you're gonna promote it, but they still have like the exclusivity for like the Wotakoi anime, and which is
that's
a
right.
huge bummer because I feel like a lot more people would watch and appreciate that anime if it A wasn't trapped on Prime and B like got a chance to have an English dub, because I'm pretty sure Amazon they don't do a lot of dubbing. Like they did it for Evangelion because that's a big deal, and it was probably a stipulation on Kara's part to be like, hey, we need this to have an English dub. But it just seems like everything else they just don't really care for. They just see it as part of the content mill. Maybe you'll get lucky and Vinland Saga will go to like Crunchyroll or High Dive or Funimation or something like that.
one can dream.
Has Netflix gotten anything recently besides like the American animes?
Yeah,
What?
Comey
Oh,
Can't
yeah.
Communicate and Blue Period are actually, they're finally doing like airing weekly on Netflix because they had done
Okay.
that with
Oh, they're doing airing weekly.
yeah. They're
They're
not
actually
waiting until
doing
it's
that.
over now. Yeah, because now they're realizing it's a pretty strong market. Anime's
Yeah,
becoming
they're
much
still
more
doing that.
mainstream.
They're still doing the drop with Shaman King. I watched the first half of that. I need to watch the second half as well. But like they just released another 13 episodes, and I'm like, it would be just so much easier, even if it was like 3 weeks behind, if you just released it weekly, because then I would be able to keep up.
Not to mention Netflix got JoJo.
That too.
Yeah,
Part 6.
JoJo, part
Stone
6.
Ocean. Yeah.
Yeah, they did the same thing they did with Shaman King, where they just dropped a chunk of it at a time. But I have a feeling that a lot of these productions, because they're being done by different studios, aren't all being done the same way. So maybe like whoever was working on Comey, it worked better for them to do weekly. But for like David Pro or whoever's doing Shaman King, maybe they were ahead enough in their pipeline to be able to be like, okay, we can do this at like, 12 or 13 episode chunks at a time. So it probably just depends on the workflow of the individual studios, because it's not like Netflix actually makes this stuff.
Correct.
It's all just they buy it.
Right.
Well,
they
I
do
guess
make the the League of Legends one, the Dota one. They made those, right?
I don't think Netflix has an actual like Netflix animation production company. I think everything that's like a Netflix original is always outsourced to like other third parties.
Gotcha.
As far as I'm aware, Arcane is actually made by Riot. Like, they actually have a dedicated animation studio.
I see. Okay.
Which I'm not a League of Legends fan whatsoever. I don't care for it, but I did watch the first episode of Arcane. It's pretty dang cool.
Yeah, it looks cool, but it's like everyone's like, "Oh, the plot, it has such big implications for the lore," and I'm like, "It looks pretty." Yeah. And I'm looking at it right now as we're talking, and like they don't have like studio details or anything on Netflix, so it's kind of your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah. Well, folks, with all of that being said, I think we're going to take a quick pause, and when we come back, we're talking about Fate Zero. Okay, so a bit about the history of the Fate franchise before we get into talking about Fate Zero. So the Fate series is a long-running multimedia project created by the company Type Moon. Type Moon began in the late 1990s with the publication of their first project, Kara no Kyokai, or The Garden of Sinners, and it was helmed by Type Moon founders and longtime friends, artists Takashi Takeuchi and the writer Kinoko Nasu. Takeuchi and Nasu both met in middle school, with Takeuchi growing up to pursue a career as an artist, and Nasu a career in the humanities. Takeuchi dabbled in working in manga and video games, but it didn't really go anywhere. He later teamed up with his old friend to form a doujin circle, and together they created The Garden of Sinners in 1998, and they released it online as a light novel. It ended up being so successful that they established Type Moon as a company and worked on their next project, the visual novels Tsukihime and later Melty Blood. Both of these are still very popular to this day, with both getting a remake and a reboot respectively earlier in 2021. However, Fate is their flagship franchise, and it first began with the original visual novel Fate Stay Night in 2004. Fate Stay Night first introduced us to the concept of the Holy Grail War, Masters and Servants, that saber gal that Will really likes, and the broader universe of Fate, where its incalculable number of spin-offs and prequels and sequels all originate. Generally speaking, the plot of Fate Stay Night follows a high school boy named Shiro Emiya who unwittingly gets himself involved in a war between different mages who all fight to claim the Holy Grail of yore. They do battle by summoning spirits of ancient warriors called servants, who correspond to the classes of Saber, Archer, Lancer, Rider, Berserker, and Assassin. There was an anime adaptation of Fate Stay Night in 2006 that was very popular back in its day, even if it created some very popular memes such as people die when they are killed, and is often maligned as having a very terrible CGI dragon. That series is probably the biggest entry point into the franchise from a Western perspective. That same year in 2006, Gen Urobuchi, in collaboration with Type Moon, wrote the prequel novel called Fate Zero, which follows the events of the previous Holy Grail War 10 years prior to the one in the story of Stay Night. It follows a large cast of characters, but it centralized the character of Kiritsugu Emiya, the adoptive father of Shiro Emiya. Urobuchi was given a large amount of creative freedom and decided to take the prequel in a different direction that the original game and anime did not, such as following a mostly adult cast of characters from multiple different points of view. He wanted to play with the battle royale aspect of it more than it being a hero story like Shiro's in Stay Night. The series went for 4 volumes and ended in 2007. In 2011, it was announced that the anime studio Ufotable would be adapting Fate Zero into animation with director A. Aoki, who had previously directed the first Garden of Sinners film and the critically acclaimed series Wandering Sun. In a way, Fate Zero marks the transitional moment that Ufotable became what we know it today, a company that produces extremely high-quality visuals with special attention to realistic environments, lighting, and particle effects, and extreme levels of polish. You can clearly see a through line between what Fate Zero looks like and things like Demon Slayer a decade later. Credit to this shift in style is mostly attributed to director of photography Yuichi Terao, who has been the director of photography on most Ufotable projects since Fate Zero. Ufotable continued to work on Fate, adapting both the Unlimited Blade Works and Heaven's Feel arcs of Stay Night, and they are currently producing one of the most popular anime on the planet, Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba, of course, when their founder isn't being arrested for tax fraud, which happened fairly recently.
I'm sorry, what?
Okay.
Can I
you
just... Is it
can read all
pronounced
about that.
ufotable? I've always called it UFO table this whole time.
I was going to make that
Oh my
joke, but yeah,
God.
it's definitely ufotable.
It's yeah.
Oh, I never knew this. Okay, I'm learning so much.
Yeah, it is able to be UFO'd.
I mean, true. Yeah.
I mean, I'm no purist on this pronunciation unless like someone comes down from the heavens and says this is how you pronounce it. I don't know.
No, it's all good.
Even
That's
then,
just
I'd
how my
probably
brain
argue with
like
them.
broke it up. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is Studio Ghibli, not Ghibli.
Ghibli? Ghibli bits? Anyway.
Ghibli.
Like giblets.
Anyway,
Giblets.
so
Anyway.
thank you. So all of that background out of the way, I will say that so typically whenever we do an anime review, we do a cast and crew breakdown, but in lieu of doing that, because there's a ton of characters, we're just going to do a factions breakdown to sort of show you exactly who's who in Fate Zero and their relationship to one another, because it can get kind of confusing if you don't lay it all out there and explain everyone's relationship to one another. So, Will, if you don't mind, break down the factions of the story in Fate Zero.
Of course. I will, of course, preface with pronunciation. I will do my best. We'll see if any of us interpret any of these names differently. But much like Austin said, the core of the Holy Grail War is that it follows the 7 main types of servants that can be summoned. So essentially we have 7 factions that are all trying to win the Holy Grail. So our first faction centers around who a lot consider to be the main character of Fate Zero, which is Kiritsugu Emiya. He's a mercenary who controls Saber in this adaptation. He is currently teamed up with one of the larger mage family clans, the Eisburns. So he has his wife with him, Irisvale von Eisburn, and they also have a daughter, Elia von Eisenburn, who you might know from Stay Night. And Kirtsugu is also with an associate of his, Maya. So they kind of have a larger team as our main character group, basically. The second faction is the Tosuka clan. So it's headed by the patriarch Tokiomi Tosuka, and he controls the archer class, who is Gilgamesh. Tokiomi's daughter is Rin, so again, for any sort of Fate Stay Night appreciators, Rin is indeed in the show.
For those who don't know, by the way, Rin is Will's favorite character of all time.
Understandable. Congratulations on having taste.
Whoa. Whoa, hold on a minute. I will not be slandered. Anyway, so yes, Rin is in this show. She has her own dedicated episode, which we will talk about later on. We have his wife, Aoi, is here as well. And Sakura is also here, but we'll get to her in just a moment. The third faction that we have is a priest of the Holy Church. This is Kirei Kotomine. His servant is the assassin class, and Kirei's father is actually the overseer of the church, who's kind of like basically the referee of the Holy Grail War, basically. We have the fourth faction, which is by the Yamato clan. So their, champion is Karia. He is kind of an estranged son from the family because he kind of rejected magecraft, but is coming back because he cares a lot about his family. He's Aoi, I'm butchering that, Aoi Tosuka's brother, and he's the uncle of Rin and Sakura. So Sakura is kind of in care of the Matori clan, and his motivation for kind of joining the war is because of her, essentially. He controls the Berserker class, whose identity is quite mystifying.
I think the one thing we forgot to add to this is his really creepy dad.
Yeah.
Oh,
Our
that's
grandpa?
true.
I don't remember.
Is that his dad or
it's
his
dad.
grandpa?
I think it's his dad.
Karia is the chosen champion for this Holy Grail War. Karia's father is like the leader currently of the Matori clan, but Karia is the one who's essentially the actual master in the war.
Right.
He basically has Sakura in his care, so she can eventually become a great mage, and Karia is essentially in the war to win the Grail so we can save Sakura from a certain fate. Pun intended. Okay. The fifth faction that we have is what I think is a fan favorite, Waver, Velvet. Yep. He's a student at basically a magic university. He ends up joining the war by stealing an artifact from his teacher that is used to summon the holy servants, and he controls the rider class, who is Iskander, or Alexander the Great. We have the sixth faction, who is Waver's teacher, Kenneth L. Minloy Archibald. His servant is the Lancer class, who is Diarmund Duhible?
Diarmund.
It's
Diarmund?
I think that's old Gaelic or something. It is. So don't hurt yourself trying to pronounce that.
Yeah, didn't brush up on my Gaelic today. Sorry.
I know that his first name is Diarmund.
Yeah, Diarmund. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kenneth also is assisted by his fiance, who has also a very long name, Sola Ue Nuada Re Sophia Ri, or just like Sola Ue.
You did pretty good at that one.
Thank you. And then finally, our seventh faction is headed by Rinosuke Uru, who is a serial killer, kind of terrorizing the local area where the Holy Grail War is taking place. I'm blanking on the name of the city. It's like the name of the city.
Fuyuki City.
Yeah.
Fuyuki.
Fuyuki. So Rinosuke is kind of causing a lot of trouble, even like before the Holy Grail War starts. He's able to summon the Caster class servant, who is Gilles de Reyes, also known as Bluebeard.
Gilles de Rais.
I also didn't brush up on my French either.
Yeah, French is so hard.
Yeah, so those are the 7 main factions. It is a lot of characters to keep up with, you would think, but I believe the show does a really good job at showing each character's motivations and actual, like, character. Mm-hmm. So everyone has their moments throughout the show.
Yeah, and I don't think it's too overwhelming that you can't keep up with who's who, because most of the time, a lot of these people appear in the same scenes as one another. So it's not, I mean, it does get a little bit touch and go towards the end, but I think it's generally easy to understand who's who and who's with who and who's against who and that sort of
and
thing.
who wants what from who with the what and the yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Exactly
with all
what
these,
you just said. Exactly.
with all these, nouns and people and stuff.
Worst case, you can just draw a little chart as you watch it, and you'll figure it out.
Yeah, like the Charlie Day meme,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
It really,
linking all the
yeah, like,
sabers together.
honestly, the plot is complicated, but the characters, not really.
Fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
And we will discuss this more. But first of all, Sarah, I want to start with you. How did you first get introduced to the Fate franchise? We'll just go around and talk about everybody's history with it.
Well, okay, way back in ye old 2009-ish, it was pretty much all over the internet, especially the memes from it. And I definitely saw a DVD for like the first, I think, 8 or 9 episodes in like a bargain bin somewhere. And I was like, sure, why not? I'll try that. For the original '06 Fate Stay Night anime. So that's kind of my first exposure to it. And then I watched the rest of it online because I was a broke high school student and I could not afford the rest of the DVDs. But yeah.
Times was expensive back then.
Yeah. I mean, it still kind of is. But yeah. So that, and then, eventually Unlimited Blade Works and Zero came out and I watched those. And I think I watched them out of order. So that's a big discussion, but I didn't watch them in like what aired first. I watched Unlimited Blade Works first, and then I watched Zero. And I'm pretty sure in terms of airing, it was the opposite of that, I think.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I maybe messed up, but maybe I didn't. And
Who's to say?
yeah, and then I got really into Fate Go because it has a lot of really pretty character designs. It's pretty much the only reason why. The story's also interesting, but the character designs are where it's at.
True.
Even though I feel like everybody and their mom has heard of it, just for the folks that have no idea, what is Fate Go?
Fate Go is Fate Grand Order, which is a mobile game.
You should not play it. It will eat your money.
Is free to play, but is also a gacha game. So you can spend your money on it for that Gotcha. So yeah, it's kind of a, I don't know how to describe it, just like a fighty, like set up a team and go fight an enemy kind of battle game. But it does have a pretty deep story and a lot of interesting events. And I maybe play it once every few months, honestly, compared to other mobile games. But
Well, you play a
Lar-
lot, like compared to the rest of us, I think.
yeah, I mean, it's one of the top grossing mobile games globally, like
is.
year after year. So,
Yeah.
and there's probably a decent reason for that. And yeah, I don't know. Check it
I'll
out
go-
if you want more Fate content.
I'll go out on a limb and say that Fate Go and Fate Zero have almost nothing to do with each other in terms of understanding the other.
No, Fate Go is
for sure.
literally AU stuff that they just wanted to make more characters and sell people waifu money.
Right. So in terms of, approachability to the franchise, you don't even have to worry about Fate Go at this point. But I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So anyway, Ryan,
Yes.
how were you first introduced to the Fate franchise?
Well, I joined the UNCG Japanese club in about 2017-ish, and there was this really annoying guy who was leading this thing called Animondays, and he was like, hey, there's this show called Fate Zero, and it's fantastic, and you should watch it. And to get the guy to just leave me alone, I watched it. And he was right, though. It is fantastic.
He sounds like a really nice guy.
Yeah. I think his name was also
cool, dude.
Austin. I don't know if there's any relation, though.
What a coincidence.
Yeah. But, yeah. I watched it because you got me to watch it. And, yeah, it's fantastic. And I watched Unlimited Blade Works. After that, I still haven't watched 2006 Fate, but I have watched the first 2 Heaven's Feel movies. I'm just waiting till I can find the third one dubbed.
And Will, your appreciation for Fate, I think, might extend a little bit further than the rest of us. So, what is your history with the franchise?
Oh, what a high honor. So my history with Fate, I first got into it because I was at the time a relatively newer anime viewer, and I would do this thing where I would be like, I could ask my friends for recommendations, or I could just Google best anime and then just see what it pops out.
The internet
So,
will know. Yeah.
Exactly. So, following the internet's judgment, I discovered the Fate series and then immediately found all of the memes about how complicated the Fate universe can be. And I was like, how do I even approach this? So, I did what anyone would do, and I decided to watch in airing order. But I also want to point out that I was told via online to not even bother with the 2006 original Fate Stay Night. So I just went to Zero first because I was like, okay, people told me it's a prequel to this other show, which wasn't even finished airing at the time. I think the second, because this is like around 2014, 2015. I don't even think the second season was out yet, or at least available for streaming. Because I ended up watching Unlimited Blade Works way after the fact on Netflix.
Yeah.
But I watched Zero. Zero was my first introduction to Fate, and also my first introduction to Gen Urobuchi, and I was just completely blown away.
I think I watched
and then from there,
Madoka before this.
No, I watched Madoka way later. This is also around the era where I started to seek out the people who made the anime, not just by like title and word of mouth.
Yeah.
So from watching this, I was like, I gotta watch Madoka, I gotta watch Psycho Pass, like it just kind of stemmed from there.
Yeah. Oh no, I definitely watched Madoka before this because I did the thing for Anna Mondays about Madoka. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I feel like whenever I met you, you already were a Madoka fan.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
It was well after that you jumped into Fate.
Actually, not that far after that. I watched it like my first semester.
Well, time passed so differently back then, Ryan. It's
Honestly,
like
that's valid.
Yeah, a month felt like a month instead of a day, But for me, I really don't know exactly how I got into the Fate franchise. I think that I had picked up well, again, kind of like you guys, it's like Fate is something like if you're in the anime community and you're looking online, like Fate for many, many years would just come up, because it's just one of those things. It's one of those big institutional anime that has a lot of different entries, a lot of different entry points, and has a lot of fans. So it's like I feel like if you're into anime at all, you've at least seen Saber, and you know who Saber is, and you know what she looks like, and you know that she's from Fate. I don't think that would be a drastic assumption to make. So I probably initially heard about it then, and plus like the title Fate Stay Night is very weird, and it like stands out in your head because it's like, what does that mean? I don't know. It's a weird title.
I still haven't figured it out.
Exactly. But then I think just over time I figured out about Fate Zero and just wanted to check it out because I knew I had picked up on the fact that Fate 06 was like kind of just middling, and I didn't really know if I wanted to watch that one, but I knew Fate Zero had a lot of things in it that I enjoyed. That I had experienced mostly through Madoka Magica, which included like Yuki Kajira's soundtrack, Calafina doing some music, and of course Gen Urobuchi being the original author. Even though I don't think those are like the principal reasons I got into it, that's kind of why I enjoyed it at the time, because I was able to connect the dots between those. But in terms of like specifically how I got into it, I don't really remember. I do remember that it was really cold whenever I first got into it. Like it was winter time, like over a winter break, and which is very fitting because this show does take place in the winter, at least partially, and it's very cold in tone, or at least it can be.
It is not a warm, fuzzy, happy show.
Yeah.
No.
I think probably my favorite memory associated with the Fate franchise is Austin and I used to do these little mini presentations called Why You Should Watch, and basically we would pitch a show to like a room full of people, And like, I don't even remember if we showed clips or anything. It would be like, this is what this show is about. It's amazing. You should watch it. We did this like for J Club as well. And I was doing Stay Night, Unlimited Blade Works as one of them. And I just wanted to spice up a couple of my panels with some like screenshots from the show. So I Googled Fate Stay Night scenes. And let me tell you, I did not find a single thing from the show. I found a lot of porn. And that's how I discovered that the visual novels were not just visual novels, they were porn visual novels. Because I had no idea until that moment.
Yeah, in its original incarnation, Fate Stay Night was 18 plus, we'll put it that way.
Yeah. I had no idea about that until that very moment where I could describe what I saw, but it would probably raise our podcast rating a fair bit.
So I guess this had been the first time that I had approached Fate Zero in probably a good number of years. I had not rewatched it sort of stem to stern since I watched it for the first time back in undergrad. So this would have been around 2015 or 16 or so. And I remember really enjoying it back then because I thought it was really visually slick. It's really it's a very mature story that follows like adult characters, and just the politicking and the machinations and the backstabbing and the treaties and then the broken treaties and then all of that stuff wrapped in a package that has like excellent music, beautiful character designs, beautiful aesthetics. There was just so much to like about Fate Zero back then, and I feel like most of my enjoyment for it was retained in this most recent watch through. I definitely noticed a couple things with it that I'll talk about later that I didn't really notice the first time. But for you guys, like, I guess generally speaking, how did you feel returning to it after not having seen it for a number of years?
Held up really well. It was more so after returning to it after having watched other stuff as well. Like, a lot of things had more context, and there are some episodes I just straight up did not remember, but now are like some of my favorites just because of the context they gave. Like the Rin episode, I did not remember that at all. And now I remember thinking
it really
the
is
first
a great
time,
episode.
It is, but like the first time I do remember now that I was watching it, I was like, who is this and why should I care that this child is trying to be a superhero? And then after watching Stay Night, I'm just like, yeah, Rin, do it.
I had the same exact reaction to that episode because, again, I started with Fate Zero, so I was like, I don't really know who this is. Like, why are you here? Why are you detracting from the plot that's going on? Yeah. But watching it now with a much more greater understanding of Fate, it is one of the better episodes, I think, in the show.
Like, I will say, there, as with any complicated plot show, there were a lot of things that I just straight up did not remember happening. Like,
likewise.
The big moments I remembered very clearly, but like there were a lot of smaller things I was like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about this.
Mm-hmm. Like there was that point where I remembered in the back of my head, I was like, okay, so El Malloy ends up in a wheelchair at some point, but I totally can't remember why.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, and then remembering why and putting the pieces together was fun to revisit.
Yeah.
What about you, Sarah?
Well, I mean, it wasn't too different for me because I watched Unlimited Blade Works first, and like, unfortunately, when you watch Unlimited Blade Works first, in that they do reveal like who won the war in Fate Zero. And a little bit of the circumstances of the ending of that. So then when you go back and watch Fate Zero second, it becomes more about the journey than the destination a little bit. So there is like certain things like, oh, I know that guy's gonna die. I wonder how that happened. And I know, hey, wait, I know that kid. I fucking love that kid. Let's go.
Exactly.
Scooby-Doo that shit and then get caught up in it, because when real kids try to Scooby-Doo shit, that's what happens. They gotta get saved by adults because they're just kids. Don't go into dark alleys trying to save people from serial killers. Learn your lesson.
Yeah, not if you're, 7 years old?
Yeah. For real.
But Rin had a compass that let her know that bad stuff was around.
Yeah, and then she walked toward it, not away from it. Yeah, I think rewatching it, definitely there's things, especially pertaining more so to watching the Lord Elmeloy the Second series, because that's who Waver Velvet kind of grows up to be.
Okay, can you introduce that, because I kind of know what that is, but can you explain?
Yeah, it's basically
for my benefit and for the folks at home.
So after the Holy Grail War that takes place in Fate Zero, Waver Velvet kind of goes and travels around and tries to figure out a way to bring Iskander back into the world, or somehow get involved in another Grail War without it being as much of a risk or something. Mm-hmm. And he goes around and tries to figure stuff out and tries to see the world and stuff, because I guess he was inspired by Iskander's whole adventure. It's out there, woohoo.
He does mention that in the final episode whenever
right.
he's talking to his grandparents.
Yeah. So he does all that, and then he eventually becomes a professor at the college.
He becomes
that
the
had been
Archmage,
to.
I think.
Really?
I'm pretty
Shit,
sure. Based on the ending of Unlimited Blade Works, I remember that being Waver, and he was very much in charge.
Yeah. Well, he becomes a lord, so he becomes a head of a magical clan, I guess, is the whole situation of that. I don't know. But yeah, and then he also Sherlock style just kind of solves, Sherlock or Doctor Who or whatever you want to call it, solves mysteries here and there, and has a randy little band of scamps that help him out with that, while also just constantly pining for Iskander the Great to be back in his life. Haha.
He missed his big old bestie.
For sure. For sure. But yeah, it's I've only seen the anime. To be honest, I literally currently on a tab have the translations for the novels pulled up, because they're light novels originally. And I'm I'm going to read these as soon as I'm done with this podcast. Let's go. Because apparently the novels are way better than the anime, because isn't that how it always goes? So
how many,
I think that helped inform me on that, seeing it again. Yeah. What's up?
How many official releases, canon books or visual novels are there for this franchise?
Oh, I don't want to know. Probably tons.
Well, because I know Grand Order and Apocrypha and that other one are not canon. They're just
Holoatraxia. I think that one might be canon.
I think people refer to that as sort of the Stay Night series, in which Zero is part of it. Okay. So I think the official main storyline, because I don't want to get into the difference between canon and non-canon. I think the main storyline is comprised of Zero, Fate Stay Night 06, UBW, Heaven's Feel, and then the sequel to the sequel to the Fate Stay Night, the original visual novel, which has never been adapted, which is Holoatraxia.
Yeah.
And then there are some side stories which include the Waver Velvet, the Adventures of Waver Velvet.
Gotcha.
I forget what it's called.
The
I have
Files of Lord Elmeloy the Second, I think.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that's
only because I have it up in a tab.
I think that's the extent of it.
Well, I have Fate Extra on PSP as well, and from what I hear, that's a fan favorite. Mm-hmm. And they adapted that as well, didn't they? Sort of, kind of.
Well, they, I mean, yes, there's the whole Fate Extra series, but in terms of what is part of the main story, I think it's just the stuff that I said.
The term they use, they don't really say canon, they really use like timeline or alternate timeline.
Yeah.
So it kind of it sounds ridiculous, but they do have a structure for it.
It's like comic books, Ryan, so you know it makes no sense.
God, don't even get me started on comic books. I'm still in mourning.
So I guess going back to Fate Zero a little bit, so Will in his introduction basically said that like ostensibly our main character of Fate Zero is Kiritsugu Imiya, who in the original Fate Stay Night, we don't know all of that much about him as a person. We just know that he's like the already deceased adoptive father of the main character of Stay Night, Shiro. And he's mentioned a lot in Fate Stay Night, but you don't really know that much about him as a person, and you really don't get a glimpse into what the previous Holy Grail War was like. So even though Fate Zero really does shift around in perspective a lot, and I think that's one of its great strengths because you get to spend a lot of time with a very wide cast of characters that are both lovable and hateable in equal regards, but are always sort of fun to watch play out on screen. But still, Kiritsugu is like our main focus. So what do you guys think about him as like a compelling main character? Or not?
He was honestly absent for a lot of it for a main character, but I did like him. But like upon rewatching this, I really felt like the main character, like the main focus was definitely on him and Saber, like 100%. But the main character is like kind of up for grabs because I really liked Waver this time around because I don't know, I just liked him a lot more. And also Kirei, I kind of saw as like a side character, and now I'm just like, no, you really were the main villain, weren't you? Like, yeah. My perspectives watching it this time around were definitely different.
I think he is present, but like not really there.
Yeah.
Because we don't really learn a lot about his motivation or see his like means too much until like the second season.
Yeah. Iris is more of a main character than him.
Yeah, they do the whole play in the beginning where it's like, oh, we want everyone to think that Irisfield is Saber's master, so he can like work in the shadows and work alone like he's used to. And I think that kind of plays into that because like, is he the main character? I mean, technically yes, but kind of to Ryan's point, he's not always like emotionally there, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's kind of doing his own thing, and you don't really learn a lot about him until the show's almost over. He's kind of like the lens that we're watching the events unfold from almost.
Yeah. Or like he's like the orchestrator of a lot of events, but you're almost seeing things through like maybe through like Saber's lens, because she's just like, why is he doing this? What is he doing? And that's kind of how the audience feels, is like, what? But like, because him and Irisvale are always like, yeah, we gotta do this, you know, the Grail, you know, for the plan, we gotta stick to it. And you're just sitting there like, but what's the goal? What's the thing that's gonna save everybody and all that stuff that they're talking about? Like, what is it? So
I mean, would go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, well, I feel like it's definitely like it's hard to like pinpoint who is like the number one main character between the three of them. I think between Irisvale, Kiritsugu, and Saber.
Yeah, like they kind of work as like a trifecta. I
Yeah.
mean, because most of the story is sort of centered around them, as like we as the audience are supposed to think that like they are the good guys, but like Gen Urobuchi stories almost never are quite that cut and dry. And a lot of fiction is not quite that cut and dry of like clear good guys and bad guys, because there are definitely some pretty horrible things that we are made privy to that Kiritsugu does that make him very much like an anti-hero. He is not sort of the paragon of righteousness or what have you that like Shiro tries to be later on
Yeah.
in Stay Night. but it is it is kind of hard because like I think the show, just for the fact that like it contextualizes so much of the events around Kiritsugu and Saber and Irisfield that like I think we're led to believe that they're the main characters, but I think that the way that the show treats a lot of the other side characters is that they're also the main character as well of their own story. So like it is a little bit hard to pin down like exactly who the principal like focus and the principal perspective of Fate Zero is. And in a way I think that's kind of its strength.
I definitely agree. As my second rewatch here, the main thing that I really picked up on is what I think is probably the biggest strength of the show is just in its character and how the characters relate and interact with each other.
Definitely.
Because just to your point, anytime we're focused on a quote non-main character, we still get a lot of insight into what they're thinking, their desire for the Grail, and how they interact with either their servant, their master, or like other servants or other masters, like connecting. There's a lot of really good character moments and dialogue in this show that I think on my first viewing I was more focused on the battle royale plot being a new thing to me. But even watching this now with all that Fate context I now know, like just all the way that all the characters are written and interact, it's kind of hard to say like who really is a main character when they all have such an integral part of the story.
Another thing between Kotomine, Kirei Kotomine, and like Kiritsugu is like I feel like they're such strong foils for each other because Kiritsugu is over here like trying to be the bad guy who just like does things the dirty way and just gets shit done because it's got to get done. But towards the end of the series, you realize like internally, it's really like he feels like every death that he causes. He really is just kind of picking the path of lesser evil kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it.
You're talking about Emiya or Kirei?
Yeah.
Kiritsugu.
Well, I'm talking about Emiya Kiritsugu.
Okay.
He's like, because he's a total badass, but internally he's still just kind of like that scared little boy from the island who murdered his dad because his dad did terrible shit kind of thing. Like he never really wanted to be a murderer. He wanted to be a hero.
I kind of thought his background episodes could have been condensed into one, because like I did notice a connection though, like when they were talking about the mage assassin, they were like, he's so dedicated to getting his target that he took down an entire airliner one time, and then you saw what I'm assuming is that, and then I'm just like, oh, so he's not like entirely ruthless, he just he does what has to be done.
Yeah, it's basically a facade, whereas like Kotomine like has this facade of being, you know, I'm the, you know, neutral party, church man, everything's fine, and then internally he's a total sociopath who just murders anybody because he's like, you know what, this will be interesting. Let me just betray Tosaka. Why not?
I will say there was one thing that he said towards the end. I think it was in like the second or third to last episode that just actually made me go, wait a second. So we know how high stakes the Holy Grail War is. Like, you literally could get your heart's desire. Theoretically, it's kind of still up in the air as to what the Holy Grail actually does.
It's a lot of caveats with that.
Exactly, yeah.
Asterisk, yeah.
As far as you think, though, you get your heart's desire. That is what you go into this thinking. And Kirei goes into this, and he's just like, yeah, I don't know what my wish is going to be. And I'm like, hold up. You're in this for shits and giggles? Like, this is high stakes. Like, you could literally die. Why? Like, it made no sense to me.
Emotions at some point, you know.
It made no sense to me that he would go to such extremes for some end goal that he's like, I don't know. Like, it was just like, no, I could see doing this if you were like, I don't know, even if it was as trivial as I'm going to save my dead wife, but he's a priest, so he doesn't have one of those. But, like,
well, I think
either way, like, something as stereotypical as that, I would believe more over, I don't know why I'm doing this, I just am.
Well, I think it kind of shifts a bit. It's like initially in the very beginning of the show, it does not seem that Kirei is particularly personally invested in the Grail War to any great degree. He's just kind of following orders and going along with Tosaka because his dad had some machinations that they would work together, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But then sort of as he has his continued conversations with Gilgamesh about, like, the nature of desire and like life and things like that, and you get the revelation that Kirei basically he feels like completely empty inside, and I think his reasoning for wanting the Grail kind of is a reflection of that, because I the way that I read it was that he was going to use his wish to figure out like what his desires actually are, to like have that revealed to him, which I guess makes sense if you're somebody who's like that deeply disconnected from both yourself and the world around you, and also like very sociopathic.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of what it boils down to, is it is like the fact that he's just a giant sociopath. But even then, I'm just like, literally, I can't understand why you would like risk your life in such a high stakes thing with no end goal.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's him just kind of searching for himself, and I think the show really kind of puts it where it's like, oh, the Grail chose you, even if you don't know why yet, you will find out as time goes on.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I was sort of going back to Kiritsugu's issue. It's like they basically contextualize towards the end of the show that he is like the walking, talking, breathing version of the trolley problem, which I thought was kind of funny. Which the whole thing about the trolley problem is that it's supposed to reveal like the inherent sort of sociopathy of a system. It's like,
Is sociopathy
well,
a word?
Yes,
now.
it is. It's like it's like the idea of like, well, the solution to the trolley problem is to just remove the trolley, and you and then in a way, I mean, that's very simplistic, but that's kind of the idea, right? It's like, but Kiritsugu has in his mind is like, yes, I must create suffering in order to end suffering, and that's sort of his thing. But I think his arc, and I feel like this could have been a little bit more established in the very end, and maybe they just ran out of time, but I wish that they had focused more on Kiritsugu coming to that realization, because I think he kind of does, in the sense that like he realizes that, oh, it's not about like preventing suffering and sorrow from happening by like killing people that may cause it. It's about doing as much good as you can do. And he does that through like rescuing Shiro.
Yeah.
And he's so just delighted and just what's the word I'm looking for? Like relieved, I guess, that he found like
Some good came out of
living...
this entire debacle.
Right. Which is kind of how you want to sort of contextualize things, I guess, in the best way that you can, because I mean, like, it's kind of the Death Note issue too, I guess. It's just like you cannot necessarily end all suffering, but you can add good things to the world, I suppose. And I think that's kind of what he realized in the end. At least that's how I read it. If you guys read it differently,
Yeah, kind of. Also,
I'm glad that
speaking
you
of the
said it like
trolley
that.
problem, sorry, go ahead, Will.
I was going to say, I'm glad that you said it like that, because that's one of the very few issues I have with this show, is that it does so well with how characters interact with each other. And I think with Kiritsugu, he already has a lot going on with him and Kirei kind of being foils of each other. But through that discovery that he makes, I really wish that he actually got to interact with Saber more. Because a lot of the show, him and Saber, even though he's actually her master, like I don't think they ever have like an actual like deeper conversation besides just vaguely talking about their plan. And they both have like very similar like end goals for what they want to do. It's just that their means to get there differ. And I think if they interacted more servant to master, they could have like each learned something from each other. But instead, we just kind of get a culmination from probably my favorite moment in the beginning of season 2 with the fight against Lancer. But then like after that, they don't really ever interact again. And I think that's kind of a missed mark, but I kind of understand the why, since he already has a lot going on, plus his 2 dedicated backstory episodes. So
Yeah.
know Ryan wanted to chime in with something else, but
Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think in my reading of a couple of interviews with Urobuchi, he said that like he felt like he had to write the story in that way because in the way that makes Saber and Kiritsugu not interact very much, specifically because of their relationship that is established in Stay Night, where they don't
have one.
they don't really have one.
Yeah.
So he was sort of, and I think that you could call this sort of an inherent weakness of the property overall, and it is kind of the problem. Like
It's
the
a prequel problem. Yeah.
Okay, that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
Where like you have to fit the round peg in the round hole that's already established. So I completely agree with you, Will. I feel like it would be a much better show if we got to explore the relationship between Saber and Kiritsugu more fully. But it's just like, unfortunately, they just couldn't do that and make it make sense as a prequel to Stay Night.
Yeah, but also I feel like Kiritsugu, Master Assassin, could be better at communicating. Is a pretty like accurate.
Yes,
thing.
that's fair. That's so fair. That is
But-
fair. But in that interview as well, he said like that is kind of why they created Irisfeel, to basically be Kiritsugu's voice in a way that Saber could interact with.
I do think they do that well, because I think Saber and Irisfield's relationship is one of the better ones in the show.
Definitely.
Yeah. It is good. They have great chemistry.
They both like to
Irisfeel-
drive cars.
That's very, very fast.
The one thing that I thought was kind of odd, though, I wanted to bring it up when we were talking about the trolley problem. This time that I was watching this, I've now since watched Evangelion. Did you get the same vibe as like the last 2 episodes of Evangelion from that entire like sequence of him
Yes.
being inside the Grail?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was just
100%.
like,
Oh, for sure.
okay, this is now Evangelion.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, if that wasn't intentional, it had to have been like subconsciously
Yeah.
Eva, because it
was
basically
so
like
on point.
We have reached existential breakdown time. Let's go.
Exactly.
basically. Because I mean, it is very much like the third impact sequence in the end of Eva, or maybe more so like TV ending. But
Yeah.
that's basically what happens in the last few episodes, which is probably why I like this show.
Yeah.
Anything that reminds me of Ava, I like.